Highling 101. In this video, we're going to look at an example of comparative reconstruction using two sets of cognates from four Indo-European languages: Sanskrit, Latin, Ancient Greek, and Gothic. All of these languages belong to the Indo-European language family, which means that they all share a common ancestor language, which we call Proto-Indo-European. Now, we don't know for sure what Proto-Indo-European sounded like because we have no written records of it. But we can form an educated guess by comparing words that have the same meaning from some of its descendant languages. So let's start by looking at the words for father in these four languages. And by the way, I will let you know that the phonetic transcriptions are simplified a bit just to make things easier to understand. So what we have here is Sanskrit, pitar, Latin, pater, Ancient Greek, pater, and Gothic, fadar. So we want to start by looking at the first sound in these words and try to figure out what was the first sound in the protoform, meaning the Proto-Indo-European word for father. We can see that three of these words begin with the sound p, a voiceless bilabial stop, and one of them, Gothic, starts with f, a voiceless labiodental fricative. So we want to think about two principles: the majority principle and the most natural development principle. The majority principle says that if a certain sound is found in the majority of the cognates, then that is most likely the sound that was in the protoform. So that tells us that the most likely sound at the beginning of this word was p, not f. The most natural development principle tells us the same thing because it is much more likely for a stop to turn into a fricative than the other way around. So with both of those principles in mind, we can guess that the protoform most likely began with p. Now after that, we have three of the words have the vowel a, and then one of them, Sanskrit, has the vowel e. So the majority principle tells us that the most likely vowel in the protoform was a. After that, three of these words have the voiceless stop t, and one of them, Gothic, has the voiced stop d. Now, again, the majority principle and the most natural development principle both tell us that the most likely sound in the protoform was the voiceless stop t. And that's because it appears in three out of these four cognates. And also, it is much more likely for a voiceless consonant to turn into a voiced consonant than the other way around. Now, at the end of the words, two of these words end in r and two of them end in air. So just based on these cognates, we can't really be sure which of those is more likely. But if we were to look at more cognates from other Indo-European languages, we would find that most likely this form of the noun ended in air in Proto-Indo-European. And so we get the protoform pater, and we mark that with an asterisk before the word to show that this is a reconstruction, meaning that we don't actually know for sure that this was the word in Proto-Indo-European, but this is our best guess. Now you'll notice that this word pater happens to be the same as the Latin and Ancient Greek words. So if this really is the protoform, then that means that in Latin and Ancient Greek, the words didn't change, but in Sanskrit and Gothic, they did undergo some sound change. But you can't always be sure that that's going to happen because it could be that all of the languages that you're looking at had some form of sound change. So you could end up with a protoform that isn't exactly the same as any of the later forms that you're comparing. Now let's take a look at the words for foot in these four languages. So here we have Sanskrit, padas, Latin, pedis, Ancient Greek, podos, and Gothic, foetus. Okay, so at the beginning of these words, we have a very similar situation to the first sound in the words for father. So 3 of these languages have p at the beginning, and then one of them, Gothic, has f at the beginning. And this is not surprising. This shows that there has been some systematic sound change, and most likely, if you were to look at other words that start in p in some of these languages, you would find that those words also start in f in Gothic. So this is not just a sound change that happened in one word, but a similar change happened in many words. So we already saw that both the majority principle and the most natural development principle tell us that the protoform most likely began with p, with a voiceless bilabial stop, because this is in the majority of the words, and also we would expect a stop to turn into a fricative, but not the other way around. Looking at the next sound, we see that 2 of these languages have the vowel O. One of them has a, and one of them has a. So since we see O in 2 of the words, our best guess is that that's the vowel that was found in the protoform. If we were to look at more Indo-European cognates, that would be further confirmed. Following that, the next consonant in 3 of these languages is d, and in one of them is t. Now, the most natural development principle tells us that it's more likely for a voiceless stop to become a voiced stop than the other way around. However, the majority principle tells us that if we find a certain sound in the majority of the cognates, that was more likely the sound that was in the protoform. And we do see only in one of these cognates is the sound t, and in all but one of them we have the sound d. So we can guess it's more likely that the protoform had the voiced sound d. And then after that, we have different endings in each of these cognates. All of them end in s, so we can be pretty sure that there was a s in the protoform. They all have different vowels before the s, so that doesn't really tell us much about what vowel was there or if there originally was a vowel there. If we were to look at other Indo-European cognates, what we would find is that most likely the protoform had no vowel there, and that was actually inserted in between those consonants for ease of pronunciation. And so we would eventually get the protoform podes for foot. And again, we mark that with an asterisk to show that this is not a this is a reconstruction. So this is not something that we know for sure. This is just kind of our best guess. So this is an example of how you can use cognates from related languages to try to guess what the protoforms most likely sounded like. And you can see that in some cases we can't really be certain, but by comparing the sounds, we can try to figure out what was most probably the original form that these words evolved from. Now, if you were going to look at all of the different Indo-European languages, this would be a much more complicated process that would involve looking at many different languages, many different noun forms, and so on. But this is just a small example of how you can use cognates from related languages to try to reconstruct some of the older forms from the proto-language.